"You're making a big mistake," Jordan Mitchell thought to himself, but he couldn't say it aloud. As the cold steel of handcuffs clicked around his wrists, a wave of disbelief washed over him. The crowd outside the police station stood in stunned silence, some shaking their heads, others muttering under their breath, all watching as the officers dragged him inside. It was supposed to be a routine check, just another day in his job as an FBI agent. But no, today was different. Today he was the target. A black man in a city that wasn't ready for change. What have I done? He wondered. But the truth was, he hadn't done anything at all. Jordan's career had always been spotless. He'd worked hard to get where he was, earning every promotion, gaining respect from his peers, but none of that mattered here, in the face of a system that saw him as nothing more than a threat. He was an FBI agent, trained to uphold the law, yet here he was, being treated like a criminal. This is a setup, he thought, but he had no idea how deep it ran. As the officers shoved him into the holding cell, Jordan tried to steady his breathing. His mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. How had it come to this? How had they turned on him so quickly, so easily? The officers mocked him, laughing as they pushed him into the cell. The whole situation felt like a nightmare, but it was real. The weight of the injustice settled over him, and for a moment, all he could do was sit silently, staring at the cold concrete floor. But Jordan wasn't just any man. He wasn't someone who would sit back and let this go unnoticed. He was determined to fight back, no matter what it took. The minutes passed slowly, each one stretching into what felt like an eternity. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed above him, and the cold air made his skin prickle. He could hear the muffled sounds of voices and footsteps outside the cell, but no one came to check on him. No one cared. He was just another black man caught in a broken system. As the hours ticked by, Jordan's mind sharpened. He had to do something. He couldn't let them get away with this. His phone had been taken, his badge confiscated, and his rights disregarded. But Jordan Mitchell was an FBI agent for a reason. He wasn't about to let this go unnoticed. Meanwhile, in the city's elite offices, things were starting to fall apart. Police Chief Jack Matthews had no idea that his actions were about to set off a chain of events that would rock the city to its core. He thought he was in control. He thought his position was secure. But what Matthews didn't know was that his arrogance, his refusal to see beyond his own narrow perspective, was about to cost him everything. As Jordan sat in the cell, time seemed to stretch on endlessly. He could feel the pressure mounting, but he knew he had to stay calm. If he didn't, they would win. But he had a secret weapon, the truth. Jordan had done nothing wrong, and sooner or later, the world would know it. 6 hours later, the first crack appeared. The first hint of the truth began to seep through the cracks in the walls of the police station. The investigation started, and soon, the world would find out what really happened. Matthews would be exposed for his role in the unjust treatment of a man who had done nothing but serve his country. The officers who had participated in the assault on Jordan were soon brought under investigation, and within hours, 17 badges would be gone. The city was about to lose more than just a few corrupt officers. The financial impact was staggering. The city would lose $10 million in the fallout. Matthews had no idea how badly he had miscalculated, but it was too late. The damage had been done. Jordan Mitchell, once dragged into a holding cell without cause, would soon find himself vindicated. His actions, his silence, his resolve had exposed the truth. In the end, the power dynamics had shifted. The truth had come to light, and those who had abused their positions would pay the price. The city had lost $10 million, but that was just the beginning. Justice had been served. The sound of a phone ringing echoed through the empty office. Police Chief Jack Matthews had been pacing for hours, trying to make sense of the unfolding chaos. His mind raced as he thought about the investigation that was quickly spiraling out of control. The city, his city, was on the brink of collapse. He couldn't fathom what had happened, how a simple arrest had turned into a disaster of this magnitude. He had thought everything was under control. He had thought the officers had done their job. But the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. As Matthews picked up the phone, he felt the weight of his position, of his choices, pressing down on him. "This is Matthews," he answered, his voice tight. The voice on the other end was calm, professional. "We have a problem, Chief. It's spreading faster than we anticipated. The public is demanding answers. The media is already on it. And the financial damage, it's going to be worse than we thought." Matthew's stomach turned. How bad? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. $10 million, Chief. And that's just the beginning. Matthews felt a wave of panic rise in his chest. The city, his city, was about to pay a heavy price for what had happened. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about something deeper, something that couldn't be ignored any longer. It was about the damage done to the trust between the people and the police. Matthews had always prided himself on being in control, on maintaining order. But now, everything was slipping through his fingers. He ran his hand over his face, trying to think clearly. The phone call ended, leaving Matthews alone with his thoughts. Outside his office, the storm had picked up. The rain battered the windows, the wind howling through the streets. Matthews stared out at the darkened city, feeling a knot form in his stomach. The truth was out there now. Jordan Mitchell, the FBI agent he had underestimated, was about to bring everything crashing down. Matthews knew it, but there was nothing he could do to stop it. As he stood there, lost in thought, the door to his office opened. A young officer stepped inside, his face pale. "Sir, there's someone here to see you. They say it's urgent." Matthews looked up, his mind still reeling from the phone call. "Who is it?" The officer hesitated. It's one of the victims. They want to speak with you." Matthews frowned. "Send them in." A moment later, a man stepped into the office. Matthews recognized him immediately. It was one of the officers involved in the incident, but his face was different now, drawn with the weight of what had happened. He looked ashamed. Matthews didn't waste any time. "What do you want?" The officer swallowed hard. "I can't live with this, Chief. I can't pretend like I didn't see what happened. We were wrong. We did wrong. And now it's all falling apart." Matthews stared at the officer, his mind working to process the words. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I can't be a part of this anymore. I'm turning in my badge," the officer said, his voice shaking. Matthews felt a chill run down his spine. It wasn't just the officer in front of him. It was the beginning of something bigger. The truth was coming, and it was tearing through the very fabric of the police department. Matthews could feel it unraveling. "You're not the only one," the officer continued. "There are others. We're all stepping down. We can't be a part of this anymore." Matthews felt the ground shift beneath him. He had been in charge, but now he was losing everything. His authority, his career, his city. The investigation was no longer just about what had happened to Jordan Mitchell. It was about the corruption that had festered beneath the surface for years, and now it was all coming to light. "You can't leave. You can't just walk away from this," Matthews said, his voice low and desperate. The officer shook his head. "It's too late, Chief. The damage is done. We can't undo what's been done. The truth is out now, and there's no stopping it." Matthews felt a surge of anger, but it quickly faded, replaced by the cold realization that the officer was right. There was no turning back. The city was already starting to crumble. The investigation was spreading like wildfire, and soon, Matthews knew, the truth would reach everyone. But it wasn't just the police department that would suffer. The entire city would feel the impact. As the officer turned and walked out of the office, Matthews stood in silence, staring at the empty doorway. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm that was about to hit. Jordan Mitchell had been dragged into jail, but now it was Matthews who was about to be dragged down. The truth was out, and there was no hiding from it. I don't know how long it had been, but the rain outside had turned into a soft drizzle, the city's streets reflecting the faint light from the street lamps. Matthews sat at his desk, his fingers tapping restlessly against the polished wood, each tap echoing through the silent room. The weight of the situation was crushing. The phone rang again, pulling him from his thoughts. "Matthews," he answered, his voice hoarse, tired. "Chief, we've got a situation." The voice on the other end was calm but urgent. "The story's gone viral. Every major news outlet is picking it up, and the public, they're furious." Matthews' mind raced as he stood, looking out over the city. "How bad is it?" "It's not just bad, Chief. It's a disaster. The backlash is overwhelming. People are calling for resignations, protests are starting, and the investigation is moving faster than we expected." Matthews felt the heat rise in his chest. His world, everything he had built, was falling apart. He turned away from the window and collapsed into the chair, staring at the empty office in front of him. It was supposed to be a routine arrest. It was supposed to be a simple day, like any other. But everything had changed, and now it seemed that the only thing left was the fallout. What are they saying about Jordan Mitchell? Matthews asked, his voice barely a whisper. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. They're calling him a hero. His story is everywhere. People are seeing him as the one who stood up for justice. They're not talking about his record or his job anymore. They're talking about what happened to him and how the system failed him. Matthews gripped the edge of the desk, his knuckles white. What's next? We're already seeing resignations, Chief. It's happening fast. The pressure is building. People are demanding accountability. Matthews closed his eyes for a moment, trying to process what had just been said. It wasn't just about the officers anymore. It was about something bigger, something that he couldn't control. It was about the system. And now, the system was crumbling. He thought back to the conversation he had had earlier that day with the officer who had walked into his office, the one who had turned in his badge. Matthews had seen the officer's face, the shame, the regret. It wasn't just one officer. It was a realization spreading through the entire department. The truth was too big to ignore. Matthews stood up, walking to the window. The rain had stopped, but the clouds hung heavy in the sky. The storm wasn't over. It was just beginning. The pressure was building on all sides, and Matthews knew that there was no escaping it. He could hear the sound of footsteps in the hallway, and he knew who it was before the door opened. The officer from earlier walked in, his face grim. "Chief," the officer said, his voice low. Matthews turned to face him. "What now?" "It's happening, Chief. People are talking. The city is watching. The investigations are already underway, and people are starting to ask questions that we can't answer." Matthews nodded slowly, his mind still racing. He had been in control for so long, but now, it was all slipping away. The officer hesitated for a moment, then spoke again. "We need to start making moves, Chief. If we don't act fast, it's only going to get worse. The city's lost trust, and we need to figure out a way to fix it." Matthews took a deep breath, running his hand over his face. "What do you suggest?" The officer's gaze hardened. "We need to come clean. We need to take responsibility for what happened. No more cover-ups, no more lies. The truth is out, and we can't bury it anymore." Matthews closed his eyes for a moment. He knew the officer was right. The truth was out there, and it was too late to turn back. The damage had been done. "All right," Matthews said, his voice steady now. "We'll start the process. We'll do it the right way." As the officer left the room, Matthews stood there, staring at the city below. He had spent his entire career building a reputation, but now it was all on the line. The storm was far from over, and Matthews knew it would take more than just apologies and investigations to fix what had been broken. The city was watching, and now it was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. The day had barely begun, but Jack Matthews knew that nothing would ever be the same. The city was alive with the hum of activity, but it felt different today, like the calm before a storm. He stood by the window in his office, looking out at the skyline, lost in thought. His mind kept returning to the same place, the moment when the truth began to unravel. He'd thought that he could control the situation, that he could weather the storm. But now, the storm was here, and it was bigger than anything he had anticipated. Matthews could feel the weight of his mistakes pressing down on him. The pressure was unbearable, and he knew that the only way forward was to face the consequences of what had happened. The sound of his phone buzzing on the desk pulled him out of his thoughts. He picked it up, his fingers momentarily hovering over the screen. It was a message from his superior. Matthews took a deep breath before reading it. "The press conference is scheduled for noon. Be prepared. The mayor is expecting full cooperation." Matthews exhaled slowly. A press conference. He had known it was coming, but the reality of it made everything feel even more real. The truth would be laid bare, and there was no hiding from it anymore. He placed the phone back on the desk and turned away from the window. He had a job to do. The investigation had already started, but it wasn't just about clearing the air. It was about saving what little was left of the department's reputation. Matthews ran his hand through his hair, trying to think. The public had already formed their opinions. They had seen the headlines, heard the rumors, and now they were demanding answers. It didn't matter that Jordan Mitchell was a hero in their eyes. What mattered was the fallout from the scandal, the trust that had been broken. Matthews knew that trust was hard to rebuild. It was a fragile thing, and once it was shattered, it could take years to restore. But that didn't matter now. What mattered was facing the truth and making things right. At noon, Matthews arrived at the press conference with the weight of the city's expectations on his shoulders. The room was filled with reporters, all eager to ask their questions, to get the answers they had been waiting for. Matthews took his place at the podium, feeling the weight of their gazes on him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady but laced with the exhaustion of the past few days. "We are here today to address the events that have shaken this city to its core. The actions that took place were unacceptable, and as the head of the department, I take full responsibility." The room fell silent. Matthews could feel the eyes of every reporter on him, waiting for the next words. "We have launched a full investigation into the matter, and we will ensure that those responsible are held accountable," he continued. "This is not just about one officer or one mistake. It's about a system that has failed, and we are committed to fixing it." Matthews paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts before continuing. "I know that this has been a difficult time for our community, for our officers, and for the people we serve. But I want to assure you that we are taking immediate action to restore the trust that has been lost. We are committed to making things right." As he finished his statement, the reporters erupted into questions. Matthews answered as best as he could, but the questions kept coming, relentless, unyielding. There was no easy way out of this. As the press conference ended, Matthews walked back to his office, his mind still racing. The city's response had been overwhelming, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. The real work was just beginning. Matthews knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but he was prepared to face it. He would do whatever it took to make things right. It wasn't just about his career anymore. It was about the city, about the people who had put their trust in him. Matthews sat down at his desk, staring at the stack of papers in front of him. The investigation was already underway, but there was more to be done. He had to face the truth, even if it meant losing everything. He took a deep breath and picked up the phone, dialing the number he had been avoiding for days. It was time to speak with Jordan Mitchell. The conversation that would follow could change everything, but Matthews was ready to face whatever came next. He had to. For the sake of the city, for the sake of the people he had sworn to protect, Matthews had to find a way to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. The city felt different the morning after the press conference. The usual hum of the streets was now laced with an undeniable tension. Matthews knew the storm wasn't over. It had only just begun. As he stepped into his office, the weight of his decision lingered. The press conference had been a start, but the real challenge was in the days ahead. He had taken responsibility, but now it was time for action. As he sat behind his desk, the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't his superior. It was someone else, someone he hadn't expected to hear from. Jordan Mitchell. Matthews hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to say. The last time they spoke, the situation had been different. Now it felt like a lifetime ago. He picked up the phone. "Jordan," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I didn't expect to hear from you." "I didn't expect to be calling you either, Chief," Jordan replied, his voice calm but firm. "I've been thinking about everything that happened, and I need to know where you stand. You said you were going to fix this. Are you going to follow through?" Matthews felt a knot form in his stomach. This wasn't a conversation he had been prepared for. "I'm doing everything I can," he said. "The investigation is underway. We're taking steps to rebuild the trust that was lost." Jordan's voice grew colder. "That's not enough, Matthews. Rebuilding trust doesn't happen overnight. You don't just put a Band-Aid on this and hope it heals. You have to be real about the damage that's been done, and I'm not seeing that from you." Matthews paused, taking in Jordan's words. There was no avoiding the truth. Jordan was right. It wasn't enough. The system had failed, and the consequences were far-reaching. "I understand," Matthews said finally, his voice low. "And I know you're right. I can't undo what happened, but I'm doing everything I can to make things right. The department is already changing. We're taking action." Jordan was silent for a moment before speaking again. "Action is more than just words, Matthews. If you're serious about making a change, you need to show it. Not just to the public, but to the people who are in the trenches, the officers who are trying to do the right thing." Matthews nodded slowly, even though he knew Jordan couldn't see him. "I know, and that's what we're working on. But it's going to take time. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to fix things." Jordan let out a heavy sigh. "You've got one chance, Matthews. Don't waste it." The line went silent. Matthews sat there for a moment, staring at the phone. He wasn't sure what he had expected from the conversation, but he knew it wasn't this. Jordan Mitchell wasn't just angry. He was disappointed, and that hit harder than any criticism Matthews had faced before. The truth was, Matthews had failed. And now, He had to live with the consequences. It wasn't just about saving his career or his reputation. It was about fixing a system that had been broken for far too long. Matthews looked out the window, his thoughts racing. The city below seemed unaware of the storm that was still brewing in the halls of power. But Matthews knew better. He could feel the weight of the city's eyes on him. Every move he made now would be scrutinized. The truth was out. There was no turning back. Matthews knew he had to lead with integrity, but it wasn't going to be easy. He had lost the trust of the people, and the path to earning it back would be long and difficult. But he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The phone rang again, breaking his thoughts. He picked it up, already knowing who it was. It was his superior again. Matthews, the voice on the other end said. We need to talk. Matthews straightened in his chair, his resolve hardening. I'm ready, he said, his voice steady. We have to do what's right. No more excuses. No more waiting. We have to take responsibility and make this right. The conversation was brief, but it was clear what needed to be done. Matthews knew it wasn't going to be easy, but he was prepared to face the consequences, whatever they may be. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was for sure. He couldn't back down now. The city was waiting for him to take action, and he wouldn't fail them again. Matthews sat at his desk, the weight of the world on his shoulders. The storm outside had died down, but the one inside his mind raged on. He had taken responsibility. He had apologized, but none of it felt real yet. He could hear the voices in his head, the voices of the people who had trusted him, the voices of his officers, his city. They were all waiting for something to change, and Matthews knew that the real work was just beginning. The phone on his desk buzzed, breaking his thoughts. He hesitated for a moment before answering, knowing it was time to face the music. Matthews, he said, trying to sound confident. We need you here, the voice on the other end said. There's a meeting in an hour. The mayor's office is asking for your presence. Matthews sighed, his fingers drumming nervously on the desk. He had known the meeting was coming, but the reality of it hit him hard. The mayor, the city council, the people, they were all watching him now. I'll be there, Matthews replied. He stood up from his desk, walking over to the window. The city stretched out before him, a sprawling mass of lights and noise, all of it moving, all of it changing. He knew this meeting was his chance to prove that he could turn things around, but the pressure was immense. He didn't have the luxury of time or the patience of the public. He had to act. Matthews took a deep breath, straightening his tie, trying to calm his racing heart. As he walked down the hall to the meeting room, his mind raced through everything he had done so far. He had launched an internal investigation, held a press conference, and reassured the public that change was coming. But now, he had to do more. He had to show them that he wasn't just empty words. He had to lead, not just with authority, but with conviction. The room was quiet when Matthews entered. The mayor sat at the head of the table, flanked by city council members and other high-ranking officials. Matthews took a seat at the table, his palms sweating as he placed them flat on the surface. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of everyone present. They were waiting. We're all here because of what happened, the mayor began, his voice calm but firm. The city has been shaken by the actions of a few. It's clear that trust has been broken, and it's up to all of us to rebuild it. But I need to know, Matthews, how do you plan to fix this? Matthews nodded, taking a deep breath before responding. It's not going to be easy, but we have to start with transparency. We need to acknowledge the mistakes that were made and take responsibility for them. We need to ensure that the officers who were involved are held accountable, but we also need to look at the systemic issues that allowed this to happen in the first place. The mayor's eyes narrowed slightly. You're saying that the system itself is flawed? Matthews hesitated, then nodded. Yes. It's not just about the actions of a few bad officers. It's about the culture, the training, and the way we've operated for years. We need to change that. We need to rebuild from the ground up. There was a murmur of agreement around the table, but Matthews could feel the weight of their skepticism. They weren't sure if he could pull it off. How do you plan to rebuild trust with the public? One of the council members asked. It starts with accountability, Matthews said, his voice steady. We will implement stricter policies. We will ensure that every officer is trained properly, and we will hold those who violate the trust of the people accountable. But we also need to involve the community in the process. We can't do this alone. We need their input, their feedback, their support. The mayor nodded, but Matthews could tell that the room was still divided. Some of them were on board, but others were more hesitant. "You're asking for a lot of changes," the mayor said, his tone measured. "And we all know that change is hard. People are angry. The protests, the calls for action, they're only going to intensify. How will you handle that?" Matthews clenched his fists, feeling the weight of the question. "I will handle it by leading with integrity, by showing the people that we are serious about change. We have to prove to them that we are listening, that we are committed to making things right." The room was silent for a moment. Matthews could feel their eyes on him, weighing his every word. "What happens if this doesn't work?" another council member asked, his voice tinged with doubt. "Then we will try again," Matthews said. "But we can't give up. We can't stop fighting for what's right." The meeting continued, but Matthews could tell that the decision was out of his hands. He had laid out his plan, but it would be up to the mayor and the council to decide if they were willing to support him. As the meeting came to a close, Matthews stood up, his mind heavy with the weight of the future. The path ahead was unclear, but he knew that he couldn't walk away from it. The city needed him, and he wasn't about to let them down. Matthews stepped out of the meeting room, his mind buzzing with the weight of the conversation. He had given everything he had to that room, but he knew the fight was far from over. The words of the council members lingered in his thoughts. How hard it would be to rebuild trust, how much resistance he would face, how fragile everything was. Outside, the city was bustling as usual, but Matthews could feel the tension hanging in the air. His next steps would determine everything. The change he spoke about, the promises he made, had to be real. They couldn't just be words. They had to translate into action. He had made a plan, but now he had to execute it, and he had no illusions about how difficult that would be. His phone buzzed again, snapping him out of his reverie. It was Jordan Mitchell. Matthews hesitated for a moment, unsure of what the conversation would bring. He had already failed once, but there was no turning back now. He answered the call. "Jordan," he said, trying to steady his voice. "I didn't think I'd be hearing from you again. I'm not calling to make small talk, Chief." Jordan's voice was calm, but Matthews could hear the edge in it. "I've been following the news. I've been following your every move. You said you would change things, but I need to know something. What are you actually doing about it?" Matthews felt the pressure mounting. "I'm doing everything I can, Jordan. We've started the investigations. We're looking at the entire department, not just the few who are responsible. We're looking at the system as a whole. But it's going to take time." Jordan's voice grew sharper. "Time? You think the city can afford time? How much longer do you expect the people to wait while you investigate and look at the system? This isn't just about policy changes or meetings, Matthews. It's about making sure this never happens again." Matthews clenched his fists, his patience wearing thin. "I know what it's about, Jordan. You think I don't know what's at stake here? I'm trying to fix this, but it's not as simple as snapping my fingers. There's a lot more to it than that. I can't just throw people under the bus. It's going to take work." Jordan paused for a moment, and when he spoke again, his tone had softened slightly. "I get that. But at the same time, you need to do more than talk. You need to show the people that you're serious. Words aren't going to fix this. They want to see action. They want to know that they can trust you again." Matthews sighed, feeling the weight of those words. Jordan was right. The time for talk was over. He had already lost the trust of so many people, and now, the only thing that could fix that was showing real, tangible results. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Matthews said, his voice steady. "But I promise you, Jordan, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to do everything in my power to fix this. But I can't do it alone. I need your help. I need the help of everyone who cares about this city." "You've got my help," Jordan said, his voice firm. "But you better follow through, Matthews, or this whole thing will fall apart, and you'll never get another chance." Matthews hung up the phone, his mind racing. He knew Jordan was right. The city needed action, and it needed it now. He couldn't afford to wait, to second guess. He had to act, and he had to act fast. Matthews took a deep breath and picked up his phone again, dialing the number for his team. It was time to start making the changes he had promised. He couldn't keep waiting for the perfect moment. The perfect moment was now. His team needed to be ready for the fight ahead. He was ready. As he stepped out of his office, Matthews walked with a new sense of purpose. The road ahead would be long, and the resistance would be fierce, but he couldn't back down. For the first time in a long while, Matthews felt like he was truly in control of his own destiny. He wasn't just going to fix the department. He was going to rebuild it, piece by piece. And he was going to make sure that this time, the system worked for everyone, not just those in power. The work would be hard. The pressure would be relentless. But Matthews knew one thing. He wasn't going to fail again. The days following the press conference were a blur for Matthews. Each morning, the weight of the city's expectations pressed down on him even more, and each evening, he went to bed wondering if it was enough. The changes he had promised were already in motion, but the public wasn't waiting for them to take effect. They wanted to see results now. He spent countless hours in meetings, speaking with his team, making plans, and issuing orders. But the clock was ticking, and Matthews could feel the pressure mounting. It wasn't just the media, or the mayor, or even the council anymore. It was the people. The ones who had marched in the streets, who had protested for change, who had demanded accountability. They weren't going away. Matthews knew that if he didn't show real progress soon, the window for redemption would close forever. He sat in his office, staring at the stack of reports in front of him. Each one was a piece of the puzzle, a step toward fixing the broken system he had sworn to protect. But how could he fit them all together when the very foundation was cracked? How could he rebuild the trust that had been shattered when so many were still questioning whether the system was even capable of change? His phone buzzed again, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was his deputy, calling to report on the latest developments. Matthews, the voice on the other end said. "We've got a problem." Matthews stood up, his hand tightening around the phone. "What is it?" "We've had another protest. This one's bigger than the last. The public's getting restless. They're demanding immediate action." Matthews pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling the weight of the situation settle heavily on him. "What do you suggest we do?" "We need to show them that we're listening, Chief. We need to do more than just announce changes. We need to take visible, tangible steps that show we're committed to fixing this." Matthews was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I agree," he said finally. "Prepare a plan. I'll meet with the mayor tomorrow morning. It's time to put our next move into action." As Matthews hung up the phone, he felt a mix of determination and dread. He knew the time for half measures was over. The city was demanding change, and he had to deliver. But the path ahead wasn't clear. How could he balance the needs of the community with the pressure from the police department? How could he fix something so deeply broken without tearing it all down in the process? The next morning, Matthews sat across from the mayor, the tension between them palpable. The mayor's eyes were hard, his expression grim. "Matthews," the mayor began, his voice clipped. "The pressure's mounting. The people want action, and they want it now. We can't keep making promises without following through." Matthews nodded, taking a deep breath. "I understand, sir. And I'm committed to making things right. But we have to do it carefully. If we act too quickly, we risk alienating the very people we're trying to help. We can't afford to make mistakes now." The mayor leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "What's the plan?" Matthews laid out his vision for the next steps. He outlined a series of initiatives designed to improve community relations, enhance officer training, and hold those responsible accountable. It wasn't just about reforming the police. It was about rebuilding the trust of the people. The mayor listened carefully, nodding as Matthews spoke. When he finished, the mayor was silent for a long moment before speaking again. "This is a good start, Matthews," he said slowly. "But it's not enough. The people want results, and they want them fast. If you don't deliver, the public won't just be angry. They'll demand your resignation." Matthews felt the weight of the words settle in his chest. "I understand, sir," he said, his voice steady. "And I won't let you down." As Matthews left the mayor's office, he couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away. The stakes were higher than ever, and the road ahead was filled with uncertainty. But there was no turning back now. He had to act, and he had to act fast. He would do whatever it took to fix the broken system he had sworn to protect. Matthews spent the next few days coordinating with his team, pushing through the red tape that had bogged down previous efforts. He ordered new training programs for officers, implemented a new system for reporting misconduct, and ensured that every department was held accountable for their actions. But he knew that these were just the first steps. The real challenge would be earning back the trust of the people. Matthews couldn't do it alone. He needed the support of the community, of the very people who had once trusted the system to protect them. And that meant showing them, through his actions, that things were truly changing. As the weeks passed, Matthews could feel the pressure beginning to ease. The protests had quieted, but the work was far from over. Matthews still had a long road ahead of him, but he was determined to keep pushing forward. The city had given him a second chance, and he wouldn't waste it. Matthews stood by the window in his office, watching the early morning light pour over the city. The chaos of the past few weeks felt distant now, though the weight of it still pressed on him. The changes he had initiated were starting to show results. Officers were undergoing new training, community outreach programs were in full swing, and the investigations into the department's practices were progressing. Yet, despite these strides, Matthews knew that the real test was just beginning. The trust he needed to rebuild wouldn't come from simply changing policies. It had to come from the people. He couldn't do it alone. He needed the support of his officers, the backing of the city, and the faith of the community. But the fear of failure still lingered in the back of his mind. What if it wasn't enough? What if the damage had been too great? The phone on his desk rang, pulling him from his thoughts. Matthews hesitated for a moment before answering. "Matthews," he said, his voice steady. "We've made progress, Chief," the voice on the other end said. "But it's not enough. The community's still on edge. People are still watching, and the pressure is building again." Matthews sighed, rubbing his temples. He knew the work was far from over. "I know. We're doing everything we can, but I'll be honest with you. I'm worried. I can feel the skepticism. They're waiting for more. They need to see the results. They need to know we're not just talking the talk, but walking the walk," the voice replied. Matthews took a deep breath. "I'll handle it. We're going to take the next step, starting today." That afternoon, Matthews arranged a community meeting. It wasn't a press conference. It wasn't a political stunt. It was a direct conversation with the people, with those who had felt the brunt of the failures in the system. Matthews knew that it wouldn't be easy. He couldn't hide behind speeches or scripted statements. This was his chance to prove that the changes weren't just on paper. They were real, and they were happening. The meeting was held in a community center on the outskirts of the city. Matthews stood at the front, facing a room full of people. Some looked skeptical, others hopeful, but all of them were waiting for him to speak. There was no room for platitudes today. He cleared his throat and began. "I'm here today because I know that words aren't enough. I know that the promises I made in the past haven't been enough for you. And I know that the damage done to this community cannot be fixed by just saying we'll do better. But we can start by listening, by being transparent, and by showing you that we're committed to change." Matthews paused for a moment, scanning the faces in the room. Some people nodded, while others crossed their arms, unsure of what to make of his words. But Matthews didn't shy away. "I've been a part of the system for a long time," he continued. "I've seen its flaws, I've seen its failures, and I've been a part of them. But that ends now. The change you need isn't something we can do in a vacuum. It's something we need to build together, step by step." One man in the back stood up, his voice cutting through the room. "You can't just say that, Matthews. You've been in charge. The system was built on your watch. How can we trust that you're not just another guy with more promises?" Matthews met his gaze, unflinching. "You're right. And I can't ask you to trust me just because I say so. Trust is earned, not given. But I'm here to earn it. To show you that I'm not just talking, I'm acting. We've already started reforming the department. We're holding officers accountable, and we're working with the community to create policies that reflect your needs, not just ours. But this isn't a quick fix. It's going to take time, and I know that." The room was quiet for a moment. People were listening, processing, thinking. "We're also implementing independent oversight," Matthews added. "No one, including me, is above scrutiny. And I'll be the first to say that we can't fix everything overnight. But I promise you, we are committed to making real, lasting change." A woman in the front row raised her hand, and Matthews gestured for her to speak. "How can you guarantee that things will be different this time? How can we trust that the system won't just go back to the way it was?" Matthews nodded. "I can't guarantee anything, but I can promise that I'm not giving up. We're going to make this work, and we're going to do it by earning your trust every single day. If you give us that chance, we'll prove it." The woman nodded, though her expression was still one of doubt. Matthews understood. It would take more than just promises. But this was a start. The meeting went on for hours, with Matthews answering questions, taking notes, and listening. He could see the skepticism in some of the faces, but he could also see something else, a glimmer of hope. Hope that change was possible. Hope that the city could heal. By the time the meeting ended, Matthews felt drained but resolute. The work wasn't over, and it wouldn't be easy. But for the first time in a long while, He felt like there was a real path forward. The road ahead would be difficult, but Matthews was ready. He knew that change was possible, but only if he kept pushing, kept listening, and kept working. It wouldn't happen overnight, but it was a start. And for Matthews, that was enough to keep going.